without the power of God behind everything I do, I really am completely inadequate.
I'm helping the culture. These guys are part of us as well. You know, these guys are our cousin. I'm helping the culture. I'm pushing the culture forward in another way.
Hey, black child, be what you can be, learn what you must learn, do what you can do, and tomorrow.
What do you do after you read? What do you do after you know all, right? And you can say that you're truly conscious. How are you putting what you know into action?
The applause came in late. What's up, y'all? This is Jasmine Gates. I'm your host for the New Black History Makers show here with the home team, the Good News Network, bringing to you another show. We are live every Friday at 3:30. So thank y'all for tuning in. I am, of course, never here by myself. I always have a dope guest. And today we have Brianna Weaver. I feel like I should have did that. Wow, that was long. But yeah, she's coming in to talk about her work. And I feel like I wrote this down. I cannot find it. But the assistant manager for diversity inclusion at PCL.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a construction company that she works for. I thought that was super dope. Shout out to Brandon Mims, the treasurer of Compton. He connected us. Yeah. So I mean, you never really see construction workers a black woman as a construction worker or working in construction, I'll say. So when he I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, that's New Black History Making stuff completely.
Yeah.
So definitely glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
happy to be here.
Yeah. But how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Going into a holiday weekend, have plans with my family. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm like, something is in my eye. I'm like, I've been sitting here this whole time and been fine, and then
of course. Right when we're live.
Yeah, but no, I'm good. I'm excited for the weekend. It's always different because I work for myself now. So it's not the same kind of feeling I had before. And then when I was working like in the school district and stuff, and then now that it's changed, it's like I don't have to work as hard on the holidays or work as much now that I'm working for myself. So I getting to the point now where I can enjoy holidays again. So I'm like, okay, yeah, like I want to do something, not celebrate nothing, but
rest.
Right.
Rest. That is key.
I'm like, we're not celebrating America, but we will take the family time and all of that. So I'm definitely excited for that. But yeah, thank you for asking. So if you watch the show, you know we always ask 2 questions and we check in. The first one is how are you doing? But I was reading an article and they were saying it's good to get into the habit of asking like some other questions that kind of generate more thought or more of like a conversation. So the one for today, I feel like this is a crowd favorite from the guests, is how could you have showed yourself more grace this week?
See, no, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. I have a really bad habit of just working, working, not taking a lunch, just kind of, rewarding myself with things that I should already be giving myself. Like, I won't eat until I get this done, or, until, I complete this, this assignment, or until I make these calls, that's when I'll go on a break. Okay. And it's not a healthy practice. And so I think I weekly can absolutely give myself more grace on that alone. Yeah.
I think that's a good one. And it's interesting because like the conversation of rest always is like the answer or somewhat of the answer when we talk about that grace thing.
Yeah.
So I think we just typically like, you don't have to kind of accept that. I don't know where it comes. I mean, I guess we can go back down the line.
Girl, because I'm like, capitalism.
Right. I'm like, I guess we could go down the line, but it's a thing where it's like, like rest or like, and then it's like, why would you overwork yourself? But it's, we're taught to just like grind and hustle. And then as Black women, we're taught we have to work twice as hard. So it's like, if everyone else is asleep, we still have to be up, so unhealthy practices, but hopefully we can like undo those things.
Yeah. Self-awareness is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's get into just like who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Who am I? I am Brianna. I go by Bree sometimes or most times. I am a LA native. I was born and raised in Inglewood and South LA, so I like to call myself a dual citizen.
Okay.
I went to school in South LA all the way from K through 12. Stayed in LA, went to college at UCLA. My family is rooted here, so was able to kind of, jumpstart my career just from relationships in college and doing different things afterwards. I did a fellowship in public policy. That was my interest. I studied political science and communications in college, and then went on to serve for a city council member in LA that served the South LA community, so full circle.
Okay. Yeah.
And now I'm in construction. So that's kind of just me in the very, very summarized.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, as far as getting into construction, was that something that you just knew you wanted to do? Yeah, like how does that come about? How does that come for like a Black girl growing up here in LA? I feel like that wasn't just something that we just like. So how did that like come to be a thing? Yeah,
it's so crazy. So I studied political science, so it made sense that I would work for an elected, right? And in that work that I was doing, you're exposed to different people and different work. I worked on policy and legislation, and one of the areas of focus for me that I, got to lead, and I really appreciate, have to give a shout out to Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson and his office for giving me the opportunity to lead his jobs and workforce initiative. Because it was from that work that, we as a team identified construction as an area that needed more diversity. And so from the policy side, how can we work with companies like PCL Construction to, kind of bring them and those resources to our community? And in that work, in developing a public-private partnership with PCL, conversations began and our work was aligned. Our mission, I started realizing, was aligned. And honestly, it was one of the first companies, not just construction, but just companies I'd come across that really showed up in the community, had a strong presence, had great staff. One of my mentors started from that relationship. She's actually who brought me over to PCL. So shout out to Priscilla. So, just being exposed and working with them in that manner, when the time came, I was able to go over there. Yeah.
I think that's cool too, because there's a lot of different pieces. Your mentor, is that a Black woman or?
She's Latina.
Okay. Okay. So
her family's from Nicaragua.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even with that, right? So we'll talk Black and brown, because I think a lot of times we as Black women, or sometimes there'll be that conversation of like, oh, well, they didn't pass power correctly, or I went in there and they felt like I was trying to take their job or whatever. And I'm sure that exists. I know we talk about it when it's a Black woman that's older and a Black woman that's younger. I'm sure that can definitely exist when it's, of course, across races as well. So what was that kind of like?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, and I can only speak from my experiences, right? I've been grateful to have a lot of mentors throughout my career and family as well. My mom is, one of my biggest mentors, who, have always kind of tried to teach me that sometimes when it comes to our own folks, it could be like we're crabs in the barrel, right? And we know what it's rooted in. We know that it stems all the way back to slavery and kind of pinning us against each other, from colorism to who gets to work in the big house and who has to work in the field. So a lot of that, there's still great residue from that. And so for me personally, I'd be lying if I said I've never encountered that. So far, I'm relatively young. I won't say how old I am, but it's there. And for me, just trying to be empathetic to us as a people is just understanding why. Right. So yes, it is frustrating when, me knowing who I am, a young Black, intelligent woman, assertive, right? And there are folks who I engage with who are not as receiving of that. And so a challenge that I've given myself is to try not to get so caught up in taking that personally and just take a step back to understand why.
Right.
And then once I understand why, then, I feel bad because I can't relate to that. Right.
Yeah.
Like when Brandon connected me to you, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go support. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just my approach. But I'm also aware that the trauma of Black people in this country is still very present. And I don't know if that's something that's that all of us across the board are aware of it right now.
That's good. And I think sometimes it is, oftentimes it is the
Yeah.
younger generation, us realizing like, okay, that's a trauma response. You know, even that language, right? Like sometimes our grandparents and our parents are not using that, right? But we're able to see it and see like, find some type of grace in that and just be like, yeah, I do not appreciate how you're teaching me, but I'm not going to respond the way that people typically maybe respond to this. And I think sometimes those can be turning points. Maybe they won't like express it to us, you know, like actually, but they'll go home or they'll treat somebody else differently because of the response, you know, that you gave them. So I think that, you know, that's an interesting point. But even just like just the passing of resources. And I think sometimes we as Black women don't necessarily feel like we can get into space. That's why I was like, was it a Black woman that, you know, handed you that lob or whatever? But sometimes we don't feel like we can get into a space where someone will, you know, pass us. And then especially with the work that you're doing, you know, like that's a space where it's like, are there, you know, people
where
that
are we?
So that's definitely an interesting story. But shout out, you know, to her, to your mentor, for sure.
And still mentoring me, like, you know, since I started the company. I would say like literally the successes that I've garnered over the, you know, the little bit of over a year since I've been there have been because of a lot of lobs she's thrown me, you know, of her just saying, hey, I noticed this characteristic in you. How can we, you know, set this up so that you can show up as a better leader and be more objective, right? Like it's those types of conversations that are really developing me, and it's hard and they're very deep. And a lot of times, you know, from kind of just tracking, okay, well, why do I show up that way? Well, what happened? You know, you track your trauma, you know, and it's really heavy stuff. And so to have a mentor who can mentor me in the professional space, but then on the personal piece, which is also a part of the professional, because one thing she says a lot that I love is that she's tired of it being two different things. Like who you are personally, your authentic self should be shown in who you show up. It's a lot to have to switch every day. You know, we already know code switching. That's something else, but you know, I should just be able to show up as me. And so to be able to have someone who empowers me to do that has really made a difference in, you know, me feeling like I can do this work, because there aren't a lot of people like me, you know?
Oh, that's really good. So shout out to that. I think it sounds like a very like healthy experience, you know, because life is going to life, right? People are going to be people, right? But then to have something core, something that's like helping you to be grounded. And then I know oftentimes too, a lot of us are going into spaces where maybe our parents were not in those spaces, right? So even like, just you in construction, right? Like, or me going into this kind of like different wave of like entrepreneurship or whatever, like that's not something that the generations before me necessarily had. So it's like they can encourage you and do whatever, but to have somebody like that's in the field that's like, I know too, you know? So shout out to her.
Stability too, right? Like a big thing that came up when I was discussing with my family at the time, my grandmother, who's no longer with us, she is another huge mentor, and maybe we'll talk about her some other time on the podcast, but she's a giant in my life and why I'm where I am. When I was talking to her and my mom about it, you know, my mom was just like, well, you know, weigh out the risk. Like, that's a good city job. You know, they have benefits and retirement, and, you know, that's the mentality, right? And me being younger, I'm just like, yeah, I know, but, you know, I want to expand myself. Like, this is something I never think I'd be doing. And I'm young and I don't have, you know, I'm not married. I don't have children. I am in a relationship, but I don't have like, you know, things that I'm super committed to that will not allow me to be mobile and take chances and take risks. And so I just remember having that conversation with my mom, and it was actually my grandmother who shocked me and was just like, do it. She never told me any. She always was like, well, you should think about this, but she was like, do it.
So good.
And it was scary. It was really scary. And I didn't know how it would pan out. But, you know, I'm just grateful for that encouragement.
And then what did your grandmother do?
So she passed away about 1.5 years ago. She was retired, but prior to that, she had a long history in terms of what she did for work. So should I just go into like her story?
Yeah, okay. Because I'm like,
yes,
I want to know, like, why did she just say
yeah. Okay, so my grandmother, her name is Lois Mason. She was born in Mississippi in a small rural town. She married my grandfather at 17. He was 18. They got married, and she had her first kid when she was 18. Went on to birth 10 total kids.
Wow.
So my mom has 9 siblings. Wow. She and my grandfather moved to LA, you know, the Great Migration. They moved to LA after my grandma's 4th kid. And, you know, she she went through a lot. So she came out here, you know, tried to start a family with my grandfather, or not start, but continue having a family and have a family home. They lived off of 60th and Western. I sometimes visit the lot where their house was. It's an apartment there, but it's a huge part of my history. And, you know, my grandfather was abusive, and he was abusive. When he and my grandmother broke up, he went on to, or got a divorce. Excuse me. He went on to start a new family. Took care of the kids for that family. Completely neglected all 10 kids with my grandma. So she, being who she is, was like, yeah, no, I'm not staying here on 60th and Western. My kids, it's just too much happening, right? I have 10 kids. I have to work and support them, right? God. So for a few years, she was hustling. She had 2 jobs. She was going to night school. She was getting her bachelor's degree, and got to a point where she was, not only did she graduate with her bachelor's, the first in her family, but she also saved so much money that she was able to purchase a home in Baldwin Hills. Wow. Right. And so at that time, she would tell me the home was like $47,000. I was like, I don't want to hear that, Granny. I don't want to hear that. Right. So she purchased that home, moved her kids in there, surprised them. It was one of the best days of my mom's childhood. And that's where they grew up. My mom, she's the 3rd youngest. She was probably about 12 or 13. And so, you know, the house is still in the family, but the reason why I say she was such a giant is because throughout my life, like from when I could even have a conversation with somebody, being a young baby or toddler, she always instilled in me key principles to being how you can succeed in this country and know the limitations that people are going to place on you and go past them anyway. Right. So she educated me on what it was like being a Black woman growing up in rural Mississippi, where, you know, KKK would literally put a burning cross on her lawn every other week because my grandfather was giving out free groceries to the sharecroppers in the community so that they, you know, had more resources. Like, you know, like things like that. She would tell me at a young age, right? And this is before I even went to Marcus Garvey. So I'm just getting all of this from her. She's teaching me about good credit. She's teaching me about going to college. She's teaching me about being independent. And she's telling me the story about she and my grandfather. And she's saying, if I had taken the time to get myself set up before getting married, whole different, I shouldn't have had to go through so much to get here. You're going to get here and your route's going to be much shorter and it's not going to have so much pain, right? So to be able to have a woman like that in my corner, for most of my life up until now, really made a difference in my mentality of being a Black person, not being one of those crabs that brings the other crab down in the barrel, you know, like, you know, uplifting us, being proud, being proud, like that really made a difference for me. So shout out to Miss Lois Mason, and may she rest in peace.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Cause I mean, all those things matter, right? Like where we come from. And then often, even aside from what the people that have come before us tell us, right? Like their actions or what we have in them that just was like deposited into us, right? Like just you carrying the will of your, you know, your grandmother, right? Like those things always matter when we're talking about like what it is that we do. And I feel like it gives us more sense of like pride in being like Black. Cause a lot of people will make it seem like, I feel like there's different waves, right? Waves of being proud of being Black and then waves of people being like, oh, that's too much, you know? And it's like, it can never be too much, you know, like we always should celebrate it. We always should be proud about it. And I feel like the more you know your history, the more you know about the people that came before you, the more you're like, yeah, no, like if she did that, then like I definitely have to, or like she did all of that so that I didn't have to. Right. You know, like you said, I loved how you said like, you know, it'll be less painful. Yeah, it'll be less painful. And that should be the goal, right? Once we, you know, understand the historical context, because that is the baseline, right? That is, if to understand us is to understand where we come from in our history. For sure. And so once that's established, you know, the goal should be to make it easier for the next Black person or the next person of color or the next woman, or, you know, however you want to cut it. Like that should be the goal. And for me, it's like, hey, like for me to be, and for you, right? For us to be in this place and time in history of humans on earth, to be Black women at this time, we have so much power, right? There's so much we've gone through. There's so much we were subjected to. And, you know, the quote, I am my ancestors' wildest dream.
Like, that's so, we see it posted everywhere. It's on t-shirts and everything, but that is so powerful.
Yeah.
Like, that is what fuels me on days where I'm crying and I'm just like, I don't know if I could do this. It's too hard. People don't get it. People don't get me. People don't get my struggles, and they don't want to, and they don't have to. Right. Like, but then I think, well, there was a whole generation of Black women who are subjected to things that I will never even be able to understand for me to be here. So what am I going to do with that?
Yeah, and we carry it, you know. So I think that, you know, it just, I'm like loving this conversation.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
It definitely just puts you in a different position, and it makes you want to advocate more. And then also, like, okay, what do we do for the next generation? You know, like, what are we doing? So definitely, like, transitioning. I love how, like, the fact that you're in the space that you're in, right, in this world of, like, construction. Just somebody seeing, I think on one of your posts, the caption was, or you had reposted it, but it was like, came on this construction site and then saw, you know, a Black woman or something, right? Because we just don't typically like think to see that. But what, just like the image of you, like, I'm sure there's been cars driving by with Black girls in them, and they just glance like, oh, what is that? You know, so just simply like the image, right? Like what you symbolize on there, like what kind of has that, how have you processed that? Is that something that, like, you're like, okay, I need to really capitalize on this, just living in it right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And to be honest, like, the work that I do, you know, I get to be on construction sites, but it's not me out there doing the hard labor that's like the bread and butter of our business, right? So, you know, there are moments where I'm able to engage. Like, recently we did a career day with the school right next to our project. And so to be able to engage with students of color, or see the little Black girl in the class, and, you know, just make that connection, like, I see you, you know, I think those are very rewarding moments. And, you know, I just want, like, it's a great feeling to be like, yeah, I'm representing, you know, something. I'm a minority, and I'm showing folks, yeah, we're here, we can be here. But what really pushes me is like, okay, when are we going to get to a point where that's not, you know, the thing, right? When it's not about, oh, I saw someone who looked like me on that one project that one day, you know, a month ago. And instead it's, oh, every time I pass by a site, I see somebody that looks like me. Like, oh, the industry is changing. I think for me to be in this position, and I'm relatively new, but I'm excited to be able to contribute to that. Like, it's unfortunate where we're at, but gosh, there's so much opportunity in front of us to change that. And especially in Los Angeles, like the most diverse city in the country, you know, we don't have any excuses, right? And so I'm glad that, you know, through working for a company like PCL, I'm able to champion, you know, that passion in the work that I do. And I'm glad to work with people who have that same opinion, right? Leaders who are telling me that we need to be intentional, and I don't want to put out a corporate message about DEI. What exactly are we going to do, and why do we care? Not what we should say. And so to have that type of support has been instrumental for me to even think I can do this, right? So now I'm like, oh, this is possible. It is going to be possible that one day a little Black girl driving around LA is going to see at least one Black woman on every site she drives by, right? So that's the rewarding part for me.
And it sounds like, well, I mean, have you come into contact with other construction companies to know, like, the difference, and, like, is it a little more, like, less diverse in some of these other construction companies?
It's, you know, I have colleagues that work for some of our competitors, some other large general contractors. But something that, you know, I look at is not necessarily what the companies are doing, because construction is a little different, and I don't want to, like, you know, bore anybody by nerding out on it. But what I will say is, you know, we look at industry standard. So when I'm looking at the data for a project and trying to see what the demographics is and how significant those demographics are, I'm comparing them to local data, state data, national data. And the benchmark right now, you know, if we were to just not benchmark, but right now where we're at in industry, nationally, African Americans make up 6 to 7% of the entire construction industry. So, you know, obviously that's not okay, because we make up way more in the overall population in the country. But there lies the opportunity, right? So that, I think that's kind of been the guiding, not the guiding principles, but data has been huge to determine what needs to happen.
And then why would you say that that's I mean, we have like these, we can go, okay, racism or institutionalism or whatever, but with you sitting in some of these like positions, or you sitting with some of these people, what would you say are like some practical reasons as to why that's not, we're not in those spaces?
Yeah, I mean, construction, from what I understand, its roots is rooted in family, the family business, right? So there's a lot of nepotism. And so when you take the larger concept of how Black people have not had as many opportunities in this country for very obvious reasons, right? And you apply that to this industry, and then you add on nepotism, well, there goes the formula for us to not make up any, like most of it, or a good amount, or reflect, how much we make up in the country. So I think those two factors play a huge part in why we're not represented the way I think we should be.
Okay. Yeah. And then we have about a minute before our next break, but I know that you are currently, well, I also want to get into like what your job title is and all that. We'll get into that before we come back.
By the way, I have a few, so I will clarify.
Yeah, so when we come back from break. But Destination Crenshaw, I know that you're doing work with that.
Yeah.
And then that changes, of course, the numbers, right? Because I know that there's a push that you have to hire locally.
Yeah.
But how has that kind of been? Is that a difficult thing to hire locally, or you get pushback?
That's one of the projects that we have local hire requirements on, and it's not, because, typically for construction projects that use union labor, which is, PCL, we're signatory to the union, specifically 3 of the trades out of the union. So because it's, that's a part of it, a lot of people don't know, but most times local hire requirements or goals are established by project labor agreements with the union. So the union, that's the entity that supplies the workers, right? So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily pushback. More so in the community, there's like, well, we should have had this yesterday.
That's good. No, I like that. So we'll get a little bit more into the local hiring and then Destination Crenshaw, because I think that's a really dope project. But we'll be back in a few 3 minutes.
Out. Signups begin at 6 p.m. Sunday's open mic will take place every first Sunday of the month. It's just $10 before 8 p.m. and $20 after, so arrive early. The address is 1135 East Compton Boulevard.
The mic's Bermuda. Hey, y'all, we are back. Sorry, it's always something, I feel like. But it's cool because
it's something
a
in retrograde right now. It's Mercury in retrograde again.
Something is going on. But yeah, welcome back. If you are listening on the app during the week, definitely come back to New Black History Makers and come check out the show. You can also watch on YouTube, and then as well as Facebook. So, like you guys know, I am Jasmine Gates, your host of the New Black History Makers show, and we are here with the Good News Network. I am joined by Brianna Weaver, and we are talking about being a Black woman. We're talking about being past lives by dope women and career stuff and the women that have come before us. So this is a really dope conversation. And we were talking about before we went on break, but like basically that like push for like local hires and all of that. And I feel like there's a low number of Black people in positive spaces almost everywhere, so not just in construction, but kind of like on that. So
yeah, and because you mentioned the Destination Crenshaw project, and I think it'd be great to have them back, because right now it's headed by Jason Foster, who's a COO for the nonprofit, and he's doing an absolutely amazing job at not only being the owner and managing this project, this actual construction project, but there's so many other initiatives that Destination Crenshaw is working on for the Crenshaw community, for the business community, for housing and access to housing and affordable housing. So be great to have him back. I'm gonna put that plug in for him and whoever else from the Destination Crenshaw team to come chat more about that, because they're doing great work.
Yeah, I think it would be good because there's so many people wondering like what's going on. So I think that would really be dope. But let's get into like your day-to-day, right? Like your role. I know you said you have a few different roles, so let's get into them. And titles. Let's get into what Brianna does.
Well, in concept, right? Because something that as a young professional my mentors are teaching me is don't get caught up in the title, right? So the concept of what I do is I get to essentially lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for our projects in the state of California. Right now, our California operations are mostly in Southern California. So I get to work with our project teams here in LA, our project teams in Orange County, and then we also have a project team in an office in San Diego. So, really cool stuff. Get to meet a ton of different people. And, so many of the projects we're pursuing have community impact aspects or components to them, and or have clients or owners who have a community interest or interest in community. And so it's just been really cool to see how we as a company even strategize to want to build those, right? Because there's some who, it might be a little too much gray area. Let's just, stick over here where it's safe. But not us.
Okay. So then question, I know you said that those projects are typically the diversity projects.
Some of them,
Okay.
Not
so
all of them.
What qualifies it as that? Like, is it depending on the demographic of the location, or
I see what you're asking. No, it just depends on the owner, right? So the owner gets to set what the expectations are. So if they're going to hire you to build, then they get to tell you this is what you have to do when you build. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is just one of the things that the owner can set. So depending on what the project is, the owner might say, we want to have 20%, local small businesses contracted on this project, or we want to have 40% local hire, and they set what local means. So for some projects, it's a series of zip codes. For some projects, it's the radius around the project. So it just all varies.
Right. Yeah. And I can imagine that this wasn't always a position there, or a position in like construction. Is it something that's like
relatively new? Yeah, it is. And I will say the industry or the market is kind of what kind of set it. I want to say you start seeing more projects, more developments that have to have community beautification agreements or community benefit agreements. You're starting to see more uproar from community being more vocal. I worked for a city of LA council member. So when we're going to council meetings and we're getting public comments, or we have our committee meetings and we're getting public comments, we're hearing directly from the people. Why are you building my community? And I don't, my son can get a job there, but you have someone from San Bernardino coming. Like, what's up with that? And so I think it's, a combination of all that and probably other variables that, more recently in the past 5 to 10 years, I want to say it's becoming more popular because the industry is driving it that way, but it's responding to, the owners saying that they want to see that, and the pressure from the community and the residents, that are impacted by these projects. And, for PCL in particular, the mentor I mentioned, her name is Priscilla Chavez, and she started the program there. So there wasn't this position there before she came. And I believe she came about 7 years ago. And so, she's well respected in the industry, really a trailblazer in the DEI space and work within construction. And, she was kind of the one that set the path. And I was lucky enough, for our paths to align and to now be able to carry on that work and still work really closely with her and get her mentorship. But yeah, to answer your question, it's really a response to the people, I want to say, if we were to simplify it. And so, what other responses could we, shake up, right? If we're seeing that in an industry like construction, we're seeing this shift. So,
yeah. So then in a practical way, you're going in, right? There's a project that's being started. How do you kind of engage the community to let them know that there are jobs that are available for them and that you're looking for them to fill those jobs?
Yeah. A big part of it is education. When I was working in the council office and had just started working with PCL, conversations we had around outreach was, do people even know how it works? Because it's not like an admin position, or it's not like, if you want to be a lawyer, there are paths, but it's not so clear cut. It's not, I have to, write an application and send in a resume and I have an interview. And so first, it's really just educating people. And when you think about it, education is, the gateway of access to allow or deny access. So to be able to take those resources from a company that is a subject matter expert and come into the communities where they have been deprived of access in general and provide that education, you're already creating access. Because the thing is, we're not going to be able to, and this is something that, my mentor has told me many times, like the outcome isn't promised. You can't promise a specific outcome.
Right.
I'd love to say that from the work we're doing and other people in this space are doing, that we can say we're going to get African-American participation or representation in construction to 20% in 5 years. I wish we could say that.
Yeah.
But that's not it. But we can inform what goes into the input, right? So if we can educate and get as many people into this pipeline and connect them to the training programs or the unions directly, if that's the pathway for them, then we're putting so much into the input that the outcome has no other choice, right? When we talk about statistics and stuff like that. So, that's the start, the education piece. And that's really where people have the opportunity to make the decision, right? Like, do I want to do that? That's still helpful too.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we do outreach, we're not expecting all, 50 people who come to be gung-ho about having a career in construction.
Yeah.
The idea is, well, let me think if this is really for me. And if I'm really about it, then I'll take that next step. And we're right there to tell them and guide them on what the next step could be and how they could be successful.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And then how often are you kind of interacting with these, whether it be community orgs? I think I saw that maybe you were at a church or something. There was some type of
probably, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't, it may have been, I don't know, but
it
looked like it was some type of roundtable type of event. It looked like there's a good amount of Black men there, but how often are those kind of things happening? Is that something that you guys are just filling your calendar for the year with, or it just comes up, as time goes on?
Yeah, I mean, we like to say, and this is another thing I really appreciate, is it's, on season and off season. Okay. So it's year round, right? If we take a step back and, as anyone in the DEI space, whether it's in this industry or not, the idea is, not to just do it selfishly for your company or your organization, but to inform the industry as a whole, right? Yeah. So if we're constantly doing that outreach, it doesn't matter if that person is, going to be on a PCL project. What matters is that person is now in this pipeline, in this construction pipeline, and they're going to be on a project. Because we know with all of the projects coming up in LA County alone, billions of dollars slated, public dollars, not even the private developments, right? Slated over the next 10 years, that worker could easily be working on our project and go work on a competitor's project, within 6 months. It's all the same pool, right? Okay. So as a genuine and intentional company and partner, really, we're just trying to do our part. And that's to feed into the bigger picture, which was how can we make our industry diverse all together, you know, and in our businesses and the folks that we hire to work on our projects, what can we do as one little part of it, right? To push those to push that work forward.
I love that.
Yeah.
And also just understanding the community aspect behind it, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that that's how you like, I mean, it seems like a grassroots type of like push, you know, like
I can see that.
Yeah. Of just going into the community and saying like, hey, you know, we're going to provide you with education.
Yeah.
The option is yours if you want to, you know, you can. But I think that's good because, you know, there's a lot of other stuff that's happening, right? And there's a lot of people who feel like, oh, these glamorous jobs are what you have to go after. And if you don't have that, then, oh, you're failing in life, right? But I think there's so many people that would benefit from that knowledge or that option at least.
And just knowing, right? Like everyone's path isn't the same.
Yeah,
so when we do outreach, we're not just talking about, you know, positions in the field, like, oh, you want to be a laborer, carpenter, electrician. We're not just talking about those. Those are great positions, right? We're also talking about if you want to be an engineer. Do you want to go in, and not that we are an architectural firm, but the gamut of AEC, architectural engineering construction, right? Is that a path for you? Do you want to go to college and study construction management?
Right.
You know, like there's some opportunities where you don't have to have a college degree and you just have to have a high school diploma. There's some where you do, right? Like it just depends. But first, let's expose those paths to people so they know they have a choice. For sure. Because what I don't want, you know, little people of color, I was gonna say little black boys and little black girls, but little people of color, I don't want them to just think that their only path is to pick up a tool belt if that's not for them. Right. Like I want them to feel empowered that, oh, I can do engineering. I can say, I want more women, young girls to feel empowered to do engineering. When I was growing up, you know, I went to Marcus Garvey School, very, very strong STEM focus, right? It wasn't until I got a little older, maybe into middle school, where, you know, I don't know where the influences came from, but I started questioning my mathematic abilities. And I often think about if that were not happening, and it's no one's fault. I was always empowered, especially by my family. But if that didn't happen, you know, would I be an astronaut? You know, just stuff like that. You think about it. So, you know, just providing exposure and access, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So did you want to get into the other, or I don't know if you had like a list of your what you said concepts of like what you do. So you started off with the concept.
Okay. well, that is the concept, but essentially, what does that mean? What does that mean?
All together. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And that you shouldn't get hooked up on like titles or anything. So did you want to kind of go into your titles or just
sure? I mean, a lot of it has to do with some of the projects. Like for Destination Crenshaw, I'm the inclusivity manager there. When I'm working on a lot of our business outreach, I'm a business inclusion outreach specialist. It just, you know, that's what I mean by it just depends. So, but you know, and I love that. I want to say I love that. I love that I get to touch so many different things within the DEI space. It's not just making sure our products are diverse or making sure that we have diverse subcontractors we're providing bidding opportunities to. It's also, you know, internally, right? Like I get to co-chair our DEI committee for our California operations. And what does that mean? It means I co-chair it with someone with my awesome co-chair. Her name is Sahar, and she works in HR. And so I work more on the external piece. So together we're creating just brain children of how can we ensure that we are, again, intentionally championing DEI for our own employees. How are we ensuring that we're educating our own staff about these months that we're celebrating or these current events or, you know, whatever it is. So I get to do that too. And I love that because the company is really shifting right now. And it's just a great time to be a part of a great group of people, a great committee under great leadership that is really focused on how can we be better? You know, sure, we're making money and sure we have a reputation, because they did have a great reputation before I even worked there in the community. But how can we do more and how can we be more effective and intentional? So I really appreciate that.
Right. And then correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm hearing you talk a lot about like the other side of it. So the hiring, not necessarily process, but the education to people that may not know so that they can get into this loop of possibly working in construction of some form. But then also I feel like what you just kind of mentioned is providing education for what's happening in the culture, not necessarily in the culture, but being aware of what's happening. So we just celebrated Juneteenth, right? Not or you guys providing some type of education for that, and
Yeah.
not it just being you get a day off. So is that also a part of it as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So again, great committee. I work with some amazing people. And, around when Juneteenth, the conversation came up, yeah, we're doing something, but what are we doing? I appreciated so much time we spent on just the conversation about what we're doing, so that we can be intentional and respectful, right? Because, around Juneteenth, I guess as it was approaching, we saw a lot of things in the media around companies who were getting it wrong. They just didn't get it, right?
Yeah.
And so we refused to be in that position, and we didn't want to disrespect the employees, who were impacted by that, like me, right?
Yeah.
And so we had an amazing guest speaker join us, and we had several folks in the company join this conversation, and I was afforded the opportunity to moderate it with her, and just talk about not just Juneteenth and the history of it, because that's important, and how is that affecting us today, and what work is being done today, to champion what needs to change, as one of the multiple things that came out of the Juneteenth, I want to say, era, that era of just, like what. So I like that there was an action component to it. It was education and action, and it wasn't just tailored to African Americans, but how can we build allyship, right? Like, I just told you, construction only has 6% African Americans in it. So if we're going to champion getting more of us into this industry, we need allies, right? And so it was a great conversation and discussion. And then we sent out, several different resources, books, articles, videos, things like that for employees to tap into. But we just, we wanted to make sure we didn't trivialize it, right? There are no t-shirts. We're not making special flavored ice cream. Like, there's none of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But first of all, do you even know what it means, right? Because you didn't really hear about it in corporate America before 2020. I knew about it because Marcus Garvey School, that was the only holiday, but you didn't. So the education piece was really important.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's interesting how many people, even with the push, right? Because there were Black people that didn't know about it, right? But then you're still dealing with a lot of Black people and non-Black people that still don't know about it. Because I was at the Watts parade or whatever for Juneteenth, and a Hispanic couple came up to me. They were just like doing a walk around the park. So I was setting up to vend, and they barely spoke English, but the man comes up to me. He's like, is it a party or so? Like, in his broken English, he's like, is it a party? I'm like, no, we're he's like, what are you guys celebrating? And I was like, Juneteenth. So like, he looks at his wife, right? He looks at his wife, and she's kind of like, I don't know. So then he's like, what is that? And I was like, well, it was when like the enslaved people, they found out they were, freed, like in Texas. And he kind of was like, oh, that's a lot, right? And looks at his wife, and he's like, right. I'm like, you asked, and I didn't like. It was just funny, but the education needs to happen, and I'm always like a pusher of we tell the story as it happened, right? If there's a problem with the story, then we need to address the wrongdoing to the story, so always be clear about what it is that's happening. Always be clear about, like, especially our stories as Black people. I think a lot of times people have tried to, like, oh, well, it's too brutal. And it's like, well, you guys, your ancestors did that to us. Right. Like, we're just telling the story. So definitely appreciate like that effort. Cause a lot of times, you can see, I'm sure people have seen a company like PCL, right? And just from the face of it, or however it may look, and just assume that it's not a company that's taking that type of like stance. Stance, or taking it on as a responsibility. And just saying like, no, we are a company. We may not all represent people that really care about Juneteenth, but we're going to make sure that the people that work here are aware of it. So that's like dope, because you just never know. You just feel like people are coming in to the community and they work here, but like to have or to know that there's that kind of I don't want to say care, like but intent.
I love the word intent. Like you probably heard me say intentional about 10 times already. Like I love that because it goes beyond being, I don't want to say lazy, but just checking off the box. Like we're so past that, so past that, and people are past that, right? Like people see through the BS, especially after summer of 2020. See through the BS, right? And so it is our responsibility, if we're going to be if we have a company that's impacting people, our work we do impacts people because we're building communities, we're shifting communities, changing the face and the landscape of it, but by the nature of what we do, then it totally is our responsibility. And shame on, anyone who still doesn't get that at this point,
because it's 2020.
2022, like, 2020,
Right.
it's all the same, COVID is all weird to me, but
I really do feel like 2020 to 22, like it's just like just now, like, okay, there's normalcy a little bit, but it's like all of whatever we just went through is 1 year, and we're just gonna box it up. So then question, I know that there's a lot of pushback usually when people see construction, right? There's like some type of negative disdain, right? Like, oh, you're inconveniencing me, or there's some form of gentrification coming in. So do you feel like, I feel like, well, it's misplaced because once you guys get there, the deals have already been done. You guys are just fulfilling, a job, right? But then has there been like pushback with you? Have people like said things to you like, why are you guys?
It comes up, it's come up in conversations that I've had. It came up when I was working in the council office a lot. So, I think it's just something that is present and it's not going away. And I think the reason why it's such a touchy topic is because it's not going away, and people are trying to figure out how to not allow it to go away. And so, when you have Destination Crenshaw on, it'd be great to have them talk about the strategy of how they took the threat of gentrification into mind when coming up with the concept of the project, because it's great, and I don't want to speak for them. But just keeping that in mind, okay, if we see a problem happening, what can we do to ramp up or create resources or a safety net for the folks that are most vulnerable? And I think when it comes to those types of things like gentrification, right, we can't prevent someone from selling their home to someone who's not from there. Like, we just can't, right? We can tell them, don't sell your grandma's house. Don't put that on a t-shirt. Don't sell your grandma's house. But at the end of the day, that they're the ones that are going to make the decision. So if we know that that's happening, and some folks are just, some people are house rich and cash poor. So I get it. I empathize with that. And so if we understand that, then how can we fill in the gaps that we know gentrification is going to create? I think that's really where we are. I think, let's not spend so much energy complaining about it, because it's happening as we're complaining. So what can we do to create solutions
before you start complaining?
Exactly, right? Gentrification was happening before the term gentrification was, so popular. So, that's what I think about that.
And I think it's interesting. I mean, you've mentioned education, and it's like the owner, shout out to Keith, because he was like, every time I listen to your show, I learn something new. And it's like every time I do a show, I learn something new too, because this is something like, I think before Brandon connected us or whatever, it was like construction was not, on my mind. It was like, okay, I'm like, everybody give me a new Black History Maker, right? Like all Black people doing something positive, right? Like construction, like, whatever. But it's interesting just to hear it and to hear how much, the field that you're in can impact, what we have going on. And then especially like if we were getting into some of the higher in positions, in the field, like, where you are and stuff, there's a lot that can be changed there, right? Like even with where you are, because I don't know, would it be like board of directors or the people that are like the big wigs or whatever in your company? Is that a diverse group, or is it typically like what we think?
There's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. But that's what excites me. Like I want to share a story because I never expected this to happen. I will say, going into construction, from working for a council office in politics in a community that's predominantly Black and Latino, there are a lot of people who are just like, what? Like, those white people or the white men are gonna, and it's just a lot of fear. And, since I was a child, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna run toward the danger though. And so I did, and took the risk. And I'll tell you the story. Within my first month there, Aaron Yonke, who is our district manager, he oversees our entire operations for California. I was working late. It was like 6 p.m. and he was on his way out, and he was just checking in to see how you're doing. And we started a conversation. I forgot how it started. But it sparked him to go grab a book. And there's this book we have at the company at PCL that I guess I want to say it's not a glamorized yearbook, but it's just like of all the executive leadership from like the beginning, right? And we're an over 100-year-old company. So that's a lot of people. And he showed me it and he said, you see that? And he was essentially calling out how homogenous it was, right? And he was just like, I want to change that. He told me that this new Black girl who didn't know anyone, barely knew him, you know, low key intimidated because like the big boss is talking to me, like, oh my God, be on my best behavior. Right. And he said, I want to change that. Wow. A white man. And that was pivotal for me. Wow. And it empowered me. And it said, okay, so here lies someone who's in a position like that, who's in executive leadership, who's on his way and on track to becoming and reaching some of the highest leadership positions in our company, who's telling me this, right? And he didn't have to do that. Right. And so it's in those types of moments where, you know, we can't change the past, but God, I don't know. I have a lot of, you know, Black women friends who are in corporate America, who are attorneys and stuff. And I'm telling them stories about my experiences and they, you know, girl, what? Like, you know, and can't relate. So, yeah. And so now I see myself in one of those positions just because of that conversation. Yeah. You know, not, you know, sure, I don't see myself now actually there because there isn't a Black woman in executive leadership. But
there is not.
There's not. Okay. There's not. And what if it was me? Yeah. And to even ask that question, it says something, right? And so I'm starting this thing where it's just like I want to have the mentality already. If I'm not in executive leadership, but I'm already there mentally, right? And stay out of my way, right? And what I'm learning and being in corporate America for a year, because this is my first time being in the private sector professionally, is that most of my battles are mine. Yes, people are crazy out here, and dealing with people is hard. Yeah, but what I'm learning as I mature and grow is that I don't have to deal with the craziness. Right. And it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're passionate, especially when, you know, for me, I can be literal at times and I don't see certain things. Like it's, you know, but yeah. So I just appreciate that moment because it really did shift how the opportunity, how I see myself in this company. It really did shift that.
That's so good. Yeah. That's so good. We're getting ready to go on break, but I think it's important. Yeah. You know, for if you're going to be an ally. Yeah. You got to be about it. Right. Be about it. Don't put up no posters. That, you know, is I think what we've been asking for. But we're going to go on break. We will be back in 3 minutes. We are back. My mic is not here. No, it's okay. I was like thrown off too. But we are back. This is the New Black History Maker Show. I am your host, Jasmine Gates, and we're at the Good News Network. Having a super dope conversation with Brianna Weaver. We talked about so much. And if you can see, the title of the conversation is Black Women in Construction, but we've just covered like so much, just a whole bunch of different things. So before we left, you told us a story about, you said he was a white man, right? So I want to also comment on that, because I think oftentimes people look at me and, my brand is New Black History Makers, and I'm very pro-Black, right? So I don't necessarily, now I don't want to say I don't have the best views of non-Black people, right? But I'm always like pushing Black people, and then I'm not easily welcoming to that ally stuff if it's not real, right? So if you're conversing with me about my career and you have power and you're saying that you want to change something like the guy, I appreciate that. You get, I don't know if I'm a clap for you, right? But I'm now like, okay, you understand. And even if you don't understand, but there's something in you that's saying, maybe it wasn't necessarily wrong for all of those men to be right, but it is wrong for us to continue in that direction.
That's it.
And I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. And I'm like, that's the thing where people are like, oh, you just don't give, white people chances. And it's like, no, but I need it to be a little more weighty. I need it to be something that's a little more, that's going to shift something, and how dope would that be to anybody, not even just the Black girls, right? For that book to be there, right? And then you flip, and then you see you.
And then there I am. Right? And then, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, I can tell that story. And, and that is the seed that was planted, right? And, I don't want to, because, I'm only speaking from my personal experience. I know that there are blatant challenges that Black women face with white people in the professional world. I know that there are challenges that Black women face with Black people in the professional world, very different issues, but challenges, right? And I'd be lying if I didn't say I don't still face certain challenges. We're not all perfect, but that really sets a precedent for someone who's a new hire. When we talk about diversity and outreach and inclusion and making sure that we invite people to the table and this, that, and the other, we have to also talk about retention. And they're here, but are they going to stay? That conversation made this Black woman stay. And how many other opportunities are there or moments are there like that we could be doing, that our allies who call themselves our allies could be doing to plant those seeds to make us stay, to make us want to be there, to make us feel like that's a safe space for us. Right? Like essentially what I was sharing with you before, I was essentially being told that construction is not necessarily a safe space for us. And it's not, because we're not really here. And by concept, it's not. But now that I'm experiencing, this, there's a lot of people, non-Black people within the company that have just been pouring into me and if they don't get it, have been curious. And those conversations have been coming up around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that has been rewarding to me. Are there easy conversations to navigate? No, none of this is easy. Because again, this stuff is rooted back to 400 plus years of Africans being enslaved. You know what I'm saying? There's deep rooted issues there. And what I don't like is when people try to dilute that. Right? Like we're seeing it across the country right now. The country is just a mess right now, by the way. But we're seeing, like, oh, we don't want to call them slaves. We want to, what that came out today in Texas. I was just like, girl, that is what informs us of, if we're going to talk about equity is understanding that there is a group of people who, because of that experience, have been disenfranchised and never had a chance. And still made it in spite of that. Obama was president in spite. They love to use that as an example. He was in spite. It just, the stars aligned for him, right? They don't align for everybody or most of us. The stars align for me, which is why I feel like I go so hard for this stuff. And I'm so passionate. And I love this conversation because I know that had I not had Lois Mason in my corner, had I not had Brenda Dixon, my mother, in my corner, had I not had mentors along the way who said there's something special in this Black girl. And told me that and made me believe that, then what? The stars aligned for me. And so I just feel like what can we can just like, I just want those stars to align for more of us so that they no longer have to align, because it just is.
Yeah.
And I know that's a huge, that's way up here, and we're down here talking about construction,
Right.
but that's one of the driving factors for me, and just understanding my place in space and time. I want to maximize that.
Yeah, but it and I think it happens, as people that are sitting here, like, you and I, right? And, and whatever fields that we're in or whatever we're doing, like, is us being mindful of the fact that, like, we didn't get here, on our own, right? And there's some type of, like, allegiance, right? Granted, to the younger generation, not because they did something, right? But because there was an allegiance that somebody had to us, And I love also to one, like, the confidence, right? Because you're like, yeah, when I'm in the book, like, that's gonna be dope, like, I'm like, yeah, let's speak to it. And then also, especially in this time, like, I was somebody, right, who just went the unconventional route, right, and now was working in schools, and then now I'm working for myself, right. But it's not for everybody, right? But I feel like this is for me, right? So, but you have a lot of people who would like to be in my position, right, to where they could have financially been able to support themselves working for their own, ideas or whatever. But they are working for someone else, and they're not comfortable there, or not even not comfortable. They're not happy there, right? And whatever that may be, whether it's the environment or them not doing the work to figure out what is going to be beneficial to them. But I love how you're in a space of, like, no, I'm happy where I'm at, or, like, it's a good place to be, because there's so much about, like, even the Beyonce song, like, quit your job, whatever. Oof. And it's like, it's not for everybody, right? It's not for everybody. And if we all get out of spaces where we're not at, that 6% doesn't change. It gets smaller. So I'm like, there's even how you were saying your friends, like, them saying, like, oh wow, that's your experience there, like, I don't have that. And some people will try to dilute that and like quiet your experience down, and it's like,
well, that's you, no, but this is what most of, and it's just like, is it?
Two truths can be present, like they can be present at the same time. And it can be that corporate America needs a lot more work, but there also can be the fact that there are some businesses that are in corporate America, or some corporations that are doing it right, are trying to get it right, and are open to you being, in the book, so I appreciate that, because we're in an era where so many people, like I said, are trying to get to this other side of entrepreneurship, and neither are easy. Like you said, this is not, easy doing, this on my own, and neither is the work that you're doing. But I think we can both represent two positive sides of it, so I'm definitely, like, grateful that is a piece, because I didn't know that this would get to that point of the conversation, right? But like, y'all that are out here, that know that you don't have, or maybe, I don't know, you may need to be in the job that you're in, you may need to be there. So
there's lessons. I mean, I don't want to get all churchy, but there are experiences that I had that I didn't necessarily like in the midst of them, or felt like, oh, I'm off track, this is not my path. Right. But it was those very experiences that I now kind of, think back on for some of the experiences I'm having now that are the complete opposite, that are positive, that, but we have to, take the good with the bad. And that's something that I, spiritually am trying my best to do every day. And, just in general, like, take it with people, for me, I can be very black and white. Either you're this or you're that. Okay. And if you're not that, you could go. Right. And that's just not who we are. That's not our nature. And true. So I just feel, if there's anyone who's in that position, I would just say, take a step back. What can you take from this? Because it's not going to be forever. Right. And when you get to another point where you feel happier, you're going to be appreciative of that moment. And that's how I feel, that's how I feel, like that when I think back on struggles growing up and the insecurities I had. Right. Can you believe that some of, when I was bullied for a very short part of my childhood, and I said, oh, hell no, I ain't taking that. But when I was, they called me stupid. I am now a UCLA grad. I went to college at 16. I was a freshman at 16. And I had an insecurity about being stupid. Right. And so I forgot where my brain went, but but that's just an experience where now I think back on it and I'm just like, now I feel even more confident because I've proven to myself. At first I was internalizing what people were saying and I started believing it. But then I was still proving myself wrong because you're still making good grades. It just wasn't making sense.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I got older and a little more mature where I was just like, okay, I'm glad I had that doubt because now I don't.
Yeah.
You know, now
so, yeah.
nobody can call me stupid. You know what I'm saying?
I
So,
love it.
yeah.
And it's interesting too what we deal with sometimes as Black girls, you know, because I remember being in like or doing something, right? I was getting ready to go to a math decathlon and I had got passed the test out of what I think it was 5 of us in the whole school.
Yeah.
So I'm getting ready to go and it becomes this whole thing where like I think my parents had to come in and talk to the teacher because the kids were like, why do you get to go? Because I went to private Christian school and it was mostly like white and Hispanic. And it was like, why do you get to go? Like I was called like a black spot on the earth. Like it's just a whole bunch of stuff. And me now knowing what that means when they said it because of how sheltered, like I mean, y'all know that watch, but like being a pastor's kid and all that, growing up in the church, you know, I just didn't hear certain things.
Yeah.
You know, my parents did a really good job. I don't know if it's a good job, but they did it.
They did their best.
Right?
Yeah.
Not a good job raising me, but I was saying sheltered. If they did a good job, the sheltering was a good job.
Protecting you
From a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things that people would say to me that I didn't know. So when it was said to me, I didn't realize how bad that was.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, you think I'm a black spot, not realizing like
what that
because
meant.
I'm Black
Yeah.
or whatever. So that was a thing too. And I remember I questioned myself like, what, like, how did I, you know, like, how did I do whatever? And then another time, the whole class had to do something with math. And my dad is like a math person, right? So like math just came natural to me. We had to do like this math worksheet. Teacher was like, oh, if you get it all right, you get something like a lunch or something. So I was like, okay, cool. I get home. I'm like, it was the only one, right? So there was like, I had my like scratch sheet. I'm like lining everything up. I'm like, I'm about to get everything right. So she comes back to me, and I guess because my scratch sheets were so extensive, because I was like, I'm going to do a good job. I didn't bring all of them. I only brought like the ones that I thought mattered or whatever. So she's like, oh, I feel like you cheated.
She was questioning.
Yeah. And this is a white woman. I was a teacher. And she like came and whispered in my ear and was like, I feel like you cheated. And I was like, I did not cheat. Like, I'm like getting loud. I'm like, I don't even want the lunch. Like, I just want you to know that I didn't cheat. And like, I think she could tell from my response, like, oh, like you didn't even ask me where my stuff is.
Where's the benefit of the doubt? You already expect that this is not something I can do.
Right. But that came after, the first incident. And I'm sure so many more, but because I was sheltered, I wasn't able to call them out as like racist and stuff. But questioning, and I remember leaving that school and not being as confident as I am. Of course now as an adult, but even when I got to like the other schools that I went to, and like leaving that school and getting so many awards at graduations and stuff and doing all that and still not being like
believing it,
confident. So I think it's a thing that we're just told to kind of like be quiet and sit down. And then if you are the like assertive, like you said earlier, if you are kind of the one that like does speak up, it's like, oh no, it's something wrong with you because you're supposed to be quiet.
Or not that way.
Yeah, you're not supposed to like advocate for yourself or anybody around you. So it's interesting, and that we get to this point and it's like, well, finally we see it. And then you see so many other people that are struggling with it now. Where it's like, oh, you were the cool kid, in X, Y, and Z. But now you're struggling.
The Burger King around the corner.
Not the Burger King around the corner. But it's true how how things switch. So to be on this, because it's like you can't tell me nothing. I'm a new Black history.
Right.
And you are too, right? But so I think it's interesting just how we shift and we go through things, and I don't think oftentimes we process like that transition from from being that Black girl that wasn't secure in herself to that confident Black woman.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because at least for me experiencing that, right? Like there are times where I'm an overthinker. So, okay. So, the struggle. So there are times when, I will see, and I'll see the proof. I'll see the proof that I worked hard to create that tells me that I am adequate. And there will be that one person who says otherwise, and it could easily shake me up. And there are times where because I'm young, because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, right? I know this about me. I know this about the experiences of women like me, like you, right? And sometimes I'll have that in my head already, so I'll expect it. So I will, however that person reacts to me, I'm like, oh, they're only doing that because I'm this, that, and the other. And there are times where that is true.
Yeah.
And there are times where that is not true.
Yeah.
But why do I have to put myself through that? I
That's
know.
good. Yeah.
I'm not this little girl, you know, in middle school being bullied, called stupid, questioning. I know I have proof. I proved to myself. I proved to my family, you know? Like, why?
Yeah.
And so I think it comes from it just gets a little deeper. It addresses a lot that we internalized growing up that we need to now address, right?
Yeah.
Everyone talks about how, you know, you have a childhood only to go to therapy to repair that childhood, right? Everybody should be in therapy. I'm sorry. But that in particular, because there's deep rooted wounds and trauma from just so many different experiences like yours, like where I was just questioning myself, where, you know, I saw how another Black woman was treated and I thought, oh, well, that's how I'm going to be treated. Or, you know, in terms of physical appearance, oh, you know, the white European standard is what's beautiful. Like just so many things that happen that we see that we're exposed to that kind of feed this narrative that is literally just boiling and cooking in us since we're little. And it just grows into a bigger pot and a bigger pot and a bigger pot until the pot overflows by the time we're in our 20s. And so now what? And I've had experiences where the pot has overflowed and I need to do something about that. You know, I need to take some water out that pot. That pot needs to be empty. You know, and I know some people you can use baggage and interchange that with the same metaphor, but like I need to unpack that. Right. And I now, and maybe there's some other, you know, young women, professional women who can relate to what we're talking about, where, you know, now we're at a stage where we know, and we're not, you know, crazy. We're not questioning ourselves necessarily, but there's outside noises, distractions that are taking us off our game. You know, and not to say that they are not wrong, because they are. But again, in my work to not be so black and white, I have to understand that the world ain't gonna change just because I have a, you know, I'm protesting right now saying treat us better. It's not. And so, and I in the work, and I don't want that to keep me from the work I could do. Right. Because while I'm having these issues with this group, I have the vice president that's over our entire California operations telling me, I want to see something different in this book of executive leadership. And so I need to feed those things and not the people who don't matter, the noise that doesn't matter. Because I know. I didn't know when I was a child, but I know now.
And I think, like you said, proving it to yourself, like that's the big thing.
Because
that's who you're with most of the time. And I think I would like to say the difference between people that are like, you know, thinking like us or in the way of which this conversation is going compared to people that may still be struggling, which is okay, you know, find your way, is that we realize, or we've proven it to ourselves instead of trying to prove it to other people, because they're going to see what they're going to see regardless. And if you're not confident in yourself, then how could you be confident in me? You know, or if you haven't had to make something out of nothing, or not even make something out of nothing, but if you haven't had to challenge norms in a different way, then how can you understand me trying to challenge norms? What you're going to do is be the person that congratulates me once you see that I've already challenged it.
Once it's done, the work is done.
And that's where most people come in. But I know even with my business, it's like people didn't see, and in the beginning, I was someone who always, and I also am a journalist too. So with my pieces too, I used to send it like to like 3 people that I was like, okay, I trust, you know, whatever. It was one day like nobody was responding, and I was like getting anxious, like, no, I need somebody to tell me that this is good. And I was like, no, just send it. Same good responses came from the piece, right? Nothing was wrong with it. After that, I was like, you're not sending another piece to anybody else. You send it to the editor, and then that's it. You know, but I'm not checking for validation. And then even with my business, like when I came up with the concept, granted, it's changed over time. Now it's a little more cemented, but I remember DMing people like, hey, or just texting people like, hey, thinking about starting this thing. So many people were like, well, you need to do this, or no, don't do this. And
they projected their fears on you.
And I'm like, if I would have been like, okay, no, let's not do this. There's so much that has come from this business, right? This business is now funding my life, you know, and it's funding a lot of things that I'm doing. So it's like, well, if you have an assignment, you know, you have to go after it. And it's like, forget what people are saying, you know, even how you mentioned the guy, like beyond the guy, you having God that says there's a place for you here, you know, like I put you here for a reason, even if he didn't recognize it, you know? So I think that's like the biggest piece for me. It's like, you know, there's an assignment here and you don't have to see it. Right. But I was put here for a reason. I wasn't put here just to like, let things be what they're supposed to be, you know? So it's a difference. And not a lot of people get that.
No.
Not a lot of people get it.
No.
There's a lot of people who you would think that they're living on top of the hill. You know, you would think that like, wow, you have this and you have that. And it's
The
like,
optics,
you know, I'm not there yet, or I don't have that, but they're still living low, you know? And it's like, no, you gotta be that piece that you said, like, I've proven it to myself, you know, and then also when you prove to God that you're trustworthy of the assignments that he can give you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, well then I can give you more.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
So.
Can we talk about God for a second?
Go
Because
ahead.
I love what you said. And thank you for that. Because though I did have a white man affirm me, and that isn't something that I expected to experience, that shouldn't be what my center or core is. It is God, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, even as of lately, I have been challenging myself to in my quest on you know, not allowing the noise to keep me from my path, from my assignment. I've been really heavily relying on God. You know, there's so many mornings where I've just been like, God, I had this come at me. I had this come at me. I had that come at me. And all of this, I still have to keep it together. And I'm tired. And this person just died. And we're still in a pandemic. And I, you know, and my mental health is not where it needs to be. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
And I had a recent moment like that where I was just like, take it, you know?
Yeah.
And I felt like the weight. I felt it. And that day was one of the most productive days of work I ever had. Yeah. And so to be able to kind of just, it's not easy being a Black woman, you know, can we just, you know, it's not. And to be a Black history maker, a new Black history maker, you know, and to break barriers, it's not going to be easy. Yeah, no. And people aren't going to be receptive, and people are going to criticize you when they know you're right. When they know you're right, because they don't want to change, because status quo is comfortable for them. Yeah. Right. And in my quest to champion making sure that every undeserved or disadvantaged group has a fair shot, like that is my goal, right? For us and for all the other ones who can relate to us, because there's some really horrible stories that I'm even learning about some of my Middle Eastern friends who were born over there, my colleagues. And the stories they tell me about growing up during a war, you know, and having different religious practices that got them completely discriminated against and banned from the country, their home country, you know. So even taking it beyond, and not that it's not that ours isn't important, but there's just a greater thing. And then we go back to God, right? Yeah. And we go back to Jesus. And sorry for the people who are not Christian.
Well,
this
they
is
know
not,
how this
but
goes.
you know, okay. Well, we go back to Jesus. And I'm not a religious person, but I love to say Jesus was so dope. Jesus was so dope. Yeah. He didn't need to have on the flashy this, or be at the press conference, or, you know, be standing next to all the politicians on the podium. Yeah. Like, he was chill. You know, if Jesus was, I always like to think, if Jesus were today, in today's terms, Jesus will wake up, put on his t-shirt, his sweatshirts, his slides, you know, go talk to the homies right here, go to the liquor store, talk to the homies out there, right? Like that's the type of person he was like. And he was like, hey, I see where you're at now. It don't have to be that bad. Yeah. I could put you up on some game if you wanted, but I'm gonna still be here and love you. That's Jesus, right? And so if I could if we talk about being like him, more like him, if I could champion that in my life, be the light of the world, we hear that, you know, every space we go into, how can we be that light? And as Black women, for me, and as Black women, I think that, you know, for the ones who can relate, because I don't want to give this generalized thing where all Black women are not the same.
Yeah, for sure.
But if we could just think about that we bring so much value, we see it in the culture. So why are we not waking up every day like, damn, what am I going to contribute to society today? Where am I going to be the light for somebody today? How am I going to champion that Jesus energy, you know, the real Jesus energy, not the churchy, he was this and blah, blah, blah. Jesus was chill in my head. You know, I have chill conversations with Jesus. Like, that is my peace. Yeah. And that's where I rest. So and we need a place to rest. Yeah. It is tiring. It is so tiring. Being a Black woman. Right. And having people who don't get it. It is exhausting trying to explain it. Yeah. And you know, we can't expect that people are going to get it. Right. But we can take care of ourselves, and we can control what we can do and how we feel and what we put out. Right. So if you want to come at me with some negative energy, doubting me because of how I look and because of what you're used to, that's fine. That's fine. That's what you want to put out, but I'm not going to receive that. Right. And that is a challenge, right? Because, you know, Bree from Inglewood loves to tell somebody, oh, what you say, right?
And Marcus Garvey.
Okay. Black, you know, hey, Black child. That was the thing we did every morning. You know, we had we did the Black national anthem every morning. I didn't know the real national anthem until I went to high school. I never knew it.
Wow.
Anyway.
That's like a goal.
Yeah, like I never knew it. Lift every voice and sing. Like I could sing that thing right now, off key. But anyway, like so I don't know. When you brought that up, I just feel like that's a place of rest. Wherever your core is, that should be your rest. That's where I want to rest. I want to rest with Jesus, who's gonna have my back all the time, who's the chillest, most understanding, non-judgmental, like everybody, like I'm here for the people. Like that is who I want to champion and who I am as a human.
Right. No, I love
Sorry,
that.
I know that was a lot.
No, they know how it goes. You know, because I'm very churchy myself. So
PK.
Yeah, so no, I love that. I love that. And I love, you know, because sometimes people get a little iffy with Jesus and other stuff. So yes, the Jesus who I believe in. But no, I love that you mentioned it. And I just love this space, and we're getting ready to wrap, but I love this space because I want to be always welcoming to who I am. And I know that I exist in a very interesting intersection because I'm pro-Black, but I'm also very churchy and I really believe in God. So this oftentimes, you know, conversations about God and belief systems come up, but you have to come back. Yeah.
Hey, have me back, girl. We can talk just about God.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I went to a Christian school too. I went to Price High School. From 8th grade to 12th. So I have experiences from that you know really shaped the type of Christian I am. And like I said, I'm not really religious, but there's a reason. So tune in, y'all.
Well, I don't know if you would like for people to follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, follow me.
Let them know where they can follow you.
Yeah, super easy. The number 4 is my favorite number. And my name, Brianna. So B as in boy, REANA. That's me, for Brianna.
Okay. Yeah, but y'all will be back next week, 3:30 on Friday. Brianna will definitely be back. I know I say that about all of the conversations are good, but this is July, so it's been 6 months since I've been doing the show. So maybe we can start bringing some people back and switching some and revisiting some of the topics from the beginning of the year. But I appreciate y'all for listening. This is a great episode. I really appreciate
good. You. Thank you for having me in this space.
This is really good. So Brianna will be back. But yeah, I hope we can see how things can work or whatever, but we're connected. But y'all share this episode with whoever, because this is really good.
Whoever it can help.
But y'all, okay, we're out.
Thank you.
Put this. Are we done? Yeah, let me put the video up.
Without the power of God behind everything I do, I really am completely inadequate.
I'm helping the culture. These guys are part of us as well. You know, these are guys of our cousin. I'm helping the culture. I'm pushing the culture forward in another way.
Hey, Black child, be what you can be, learn what you must learn, do what you can do, and tomorrow.